Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, and you're listening to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are about to enter the home stretch of the football season. We are about to enter Week 9. There are 3 games left. If you don't have a bye, only 2 games left if you do have a bye, and there are some teams that are in that position as we head into the final weeks of the regular season and prepare for the playoffs. We have teams that are clinching playoff spots, on the verge of clinching playoff spots, and we will talk about all that. We will talk about all the action from Week 8 last Friday and talk about where we are as we head into those games in Week 9. Almost everybody is back in action. We had some teams on bye last week, although because of the odd number of teams in 8-3A Division 2, there will be a team that we will not have in action, and they will wait to see how the standings shake out for them as they get ready for the home stretch with 2 games to close out the regular season on next week. And as always, we will move our way down from the biggest schools to the smallest ones. We will start in District 7-5A Division 1, where we have the Sherman Bearcats, who return home from a long road trip out to Longview. They will be hosting McKinney North on Friday night at Bearcat Stadium. Sherman is 3-4 and 1-2 overall after they lost 56-14 against Longview, and McKinney North is coming off a 59-24 loss against Highland Park. And this is a huge matchup in District 7-5A Division 1. It is probably the matchup of the week in this district because as of right now, McKinney North is in 4th place with that 2-2 record, and Sherman, because they've already had their bye, is in 5th place right behind at 1-2. The bottom 2 teams in the district, West Mesquite and Wiley East, both do not have wins, so essentially we have 5 teams fighting for 4 spots is what it looks like right now. Highland Park and Tyler are both 3-0, and Longview is 3-1 after losing to Highland Park before playing Sherman. So the race is starting to heat up for sure when it comes to what we're looking at in this district, and this is a huge swing game. I don't want to say that the loser is out, but they will definitely have a hard time making the playoffs because they will not have the tiebreaker if it comes down to that for the 4th playoff spot. And Tyler would have to lose out at this point to finish with a 3-3 record. And the loser of this game is going to get their 3rd loss. Sherman does play Tyler next week, so that is obviously, we've talked about it before. The Bearcats basically have it set up. If they win their last 3, they will get in. They will have the tiebreakers over, or they should get in. I mean, there could be a 3-way tie the way things are looking. But if you go 4-2 by winning out, I don't see how you don't make it. It's when you get into that 3-3 record, you could lose on a tiebreaker. But we've said it all along. Sherman has to just win their last 3. West Mesquite obviously has not won a game yet in district, so they do have the big 2 coming up. And McKinney North is a team that has sort of lived off being able to put up points, but they also give up a lot of points. So this has a chance to be a shootout. Sherman dropped to 1-2 after they lost 56-14 against Longview. This was a game that was tied at 14 a minute into the second quarter. So if you're Sherman at that point, you played the first quarter and you score on a drive at the start of the second quarter, and you're feeling pretty good. It's tied at 14, and then Longview scores 3 more times in the second quarter, 3 more times in the third quarter to break things wide open and take down the Bearcats. We mentioned, obviously, going into this game last year, we didn't have a baseline because this game did not get played last year because of COVID-19 reasons. And like I said, it was competitive for 13, 15 minutes or so, and then Longview kind of turned things on. They are a top 10 ranked team. They were number 4 in the state before they lost to Highland Park by 5 last week. And it was going to be interesting to see after they both played Highland Park what they would look like coming into this matchup. But that game is behind them. The Highland Park game is behind them. If you look at that and you say they've lost to 2 of the top 3, they just need to beat these last 3 Elijah Chapman had a huge game, 5 catches, 132 yards, and a touchdown from Phoenix Grant, who was 11 of 16 passing. Had an interception to go with that touchdown for 165 yards, and also ran for a score to lead the Bearcats last week. So, like I said, huge game for Sherman. We'll see what happens. If they lose, like I said, they're still not out of it. We have to see what some of the other results are, but they're definitely going to have to win those last 2 games to be in the mix for sure. And just to throw out there the other matchups in this district this week, we do have a Thursday game. West Mesquite is going to Wiley East, so that's where we'll find out who stays in the race. Somebody's going to get that first district win to keep their chances alive, however small they might be. And then Tyler's going to play at Highland Park, and obviously the winner of that, as they're both 3-0, the winner of that's going to get sole possession of first place. If you are a Sherman fan, you're rooting for Highland Park. I know that's hard to do sometimes, but you want Tyler to come back to the pack because you're going to play them next week and have a chance to have a tiebreaker over them if it comes down to it. You lose a tiebreaker against Highland Park and Longview if it comes down to that. So and Longview, of course, would have the bye because of the odd number of teams. So those are the matchups to pay attention to. I would say the West Mesquite Wiley East winner doesn't matter. You probably want Wiley East to win because you do have the tiebreaker over them, and you want to kind of put West Mesquite in the rear view as much as you can, especially because you end with them. So you don't want that game to mean a lot for them, but you may want it to mean everything for you. So that could certainly help as well if that last game of the season doesn't mean anything for them. They've already been eliminated. So that's where that district stands for sure. In District 7-5A, Division 1, as Sherman hosts McKinney North on Friday night. Next up, we have the Denison Yellow Jackets in their District 7-5A Division 2 matchup with visiting Frisco Lebanon Trail, making the trip up to Munson Stadium. Denison is 5-2 and 3-2 in district play after they lost against Frisco last week, 28-14. While Lebanon Trail also had a close loss. They lost 42-35 against Princeton, and they are sitting at 1-6 on the season and 0-5 overall. And this is a perfect setup for the Yellow Jackets to get back on track, feel good about themselves after another state-ranked loss to go with the one against Lovejoy to open district play. The common denominator, obviously, they've played 2 teams that are 7-0 on the season, 5-0 in district play. They're going to actually play this week, so we'll see who actually is the better of the two. 2 teams that do not give up a lot of points and score a lot of points. There's a reason they are ranked in the top 10 in the state in 5A Division 2. Denison hung close. It was 16-7 through much of the second half. It was a defensive battle. A lot of their games, these Denison Frisco games, the last couple years have been defensive battles. And it was 16-7 into the middle of the fourth quarter when Frisco scored twice in a 3-minute span to break things open. Jadarian Price led Denison, had 18 carries for 176 yards. Caleb Hevner had 2 touchdown runs. He did complete 50 of 26 passes for 124 yards with a touchdown, with an interception. Keegan Pruitt led the receivers. He had 5 catches for 59 yards. And it was the defensive struggle that we thought it was going to be. Frisco barely got to 300 yards. Denison actually, thanks to the late drive in the final couple minutes, went over 300 yards. So it was sort of the slugfest that we thought this game could be. And just Denison was unable to make a couple plays along the way, put a little pressure on Frisco after Frisco went ahead in the second quarter. And so you have a situation now where Denison has 3 games left. One of them obviously is a big one in terms of potential seeding next week with Frisco Liberty, but they are playing sandwiched around that. They have this game against Lebanon Trail. They have a game against Princeton, who right now is 4-4 and 2-4 in district play. And those essentially, if you win those 2 games, if you throw the Liberty game completely out, Denison will make the playoffs just by winning those other 2 games, getting to 5-3 in the district standings. But essentially, Denison right now is playing for the 3rd seed, which is what they had last year. Lovejoy and Frisco both 5-0. The winner is going to have the inside track to the district title, and the loser is probably going to get the 2nd seed. Frisco and Liberty have already played, and Frisco has beaten them. So Liberty still has Lovejoy coming up on their schedule, as well as Denison. And basically, if Denison wins out and finishes 6-2, they'll get the 3rd seed, and Liberty would be 4th. Everybody else in the district has a losing record. Rock Hill is sitting at 2-3 in 5th place. Memorial and Princeton are both 2-4. Lake Dallas 1-5, and Lebanon Trail is 0-5. And as you've been paying attention to Denison season, they have already beaten Rock Hill, they've already beaten Memorial, and they've already beaten Lake Dallas. So you beat Princeton and Lebanon Trail, and you're guaranteed to have the tiebreaker over anybody for 4th place. And a couple of those games have been by the max number of points. So Rock Hill is the only game in that regard that has not been in that situation. So Lebanon Trail has not won since their season opener, which was an overtime win, no less. So they could easily be 0-for on the season. They've been the one team, I think, in the district that has taken a step back from 2020. And I know it's weird to kind of compare 2020 because obviously COVID-19, some people didn't play games, so they didn't have a chance to get their full 10 games to compare. Hey, this team won X number of games the year before. But it seems like everybody else in this district has gotten better. Rock Hill's won more games than last year. Memorial's won more games than last year. Lake Dallas has won more games than last year. Lebanon Trail's kind of the one who's taken a step back. And so this is a game for Denison. You kind of can lick your wounds. There's no shame if you do end up running the table here these last 3 weeks. You go 8-2 and your losses are 2 against the number 3 and number 9 team in the state. You luck of the draw. You got stuck in the same district as them. Otherwise, you could probably if as long as you beat Liberty, you could look at yourself as sort of a district champion contender. Just based on the other teams in this district so far, Denison's only really had trouble with one. They've really kind of handled their business against the other people. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, the big thing also is health. This could be a game where you see a lot of backups. Like I said, Lebanon Trail has not fared well against the other teams in this district. They lost by 7 last week to Princeton, but Memorial, a team that Denison beat by 3 touchdowns. Frisco beat Lebanon Trail 41-14. Just to throw out some other scores in district play, Lake Dallas, a team Denison just beat by multiple touchdowns. Lake Dallas beat them 56-32. They played let's see who else is it. They played Liberty. Liberty beat them 56-7. So there hasn't been a lot of close games, especially in the district outside of last week for Princeton or against Princeton. So it's a game that Denison should win. I think you can look at, like I said, the Lebanon Trail and the Princeton games and see wins, and then the question is going to be, you're going to go on the road against a Liberty team who knows what's at stake for them too. I think there's a decent chance, and I don't know for them. I haven't figured out the combinations yet. There is a chance if they play Princeton, there could be a scenario that if they win, they can clinch a playoff spot based on what else happens in the district. Denison cannot clinch a playoff spot on Friday because of they still have Princeton, and even if Princeton were to lose, they would still have a chance with some combinations and some other stuff. So it's just going to be a question of and Prosper Rock Hill is playing like Dallas, so that's another key one. I may have some of the scenarios wrong because there's a lot of them left because the district is so big, but I know Denison cannot clinch They would only be at four wins in district, and they could still lose if they were to lose the last two. There's a chance that they could be in some trouble depending on how things were to shake out. So, but there's a chance Liberty would be locked in to a playoff spot. Obviously, since they've only lost the one game so far, and they'll know, hey, we have to beat Denison to not play the district champ in the first round of the playoffs. So either way, it's going to be a big game, and that should be a high-scoring game, I think, a little bit. Liberty's got a great quarterback, and we'll talk about him next week. But Lebanon Trails is the task at hand. Take care of your business there, get back on track, look at winning 3 games to enter the playoffs with a little bit of momentum. And we'll see what happens when Denison hosts Lebanon Trail on Friday. And again, 7 o'clock start. Always remember to mention it because they are the ones that do not play at 7:30. So if you're heading out to Munson Stadium, make sure to get there for a 7 o'clock kickoff. We move now to District 4, 4A, Division 2. And this is one of the bigger matchups of the week. It might actually be the biggest one, just from a record standpoint, what it means in the district standings, because we have Van Alstyne traveling to Salina. We have 6-1 Van Alstyne, who is 1-0 in district play, against Salina, who is 5-1 and 2-0 in district play. Van Alstyne coming off their bye last week after they opened against Crum, and then Salina opened with Aubrey, beat them, and then played Crum last week, and they beat Crum 70-7 in a game that, talking to some people that were there, was not that close. If you want to think 70-7 isn't close at all, probably could have been a little bit worse. Salina is ranked number 3 in the state. Their losses to Argyle, who is obviously state ranked, defending state champions in Division 1. And outside of that, they've had a pretty easy time. They are 1 game off because they had a week where they had an opponent cancel. They canceled their game and they weren't able to pick somebody up. And they actually, I believe they have their bye coming up next week, if I'm not mistaken. No, 2 weeks. Okay, so Salina. Oh no, that is next week. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong weeks. So Salina has their bye next week, and then they finish with Sanger. So this obviously is huge for Salina. If they win it, they're probably going to clinch the top seed for the playoffs. Aubrey is playing Sanger this week. That's the other matchup. Crum has the bye. I'm sorry. Crum plays Sanger this week. I was looking at the wrong week. That's what happens when all the weeks are together. Aubrey has the bye. Crum's going to play Sanger. But essentially, if Salina wins, they're going to lock up the top seed. They'll have a win over Van Alstyne. They'll have a win over Aubrey. And then all they have to do is beat Sanger to get the top spot. If Van Alstyne's able to pull this upset, they'll be in the driver's seat. The winner of this matchup is going to be the only undefeated team left in the district standings. But again, like we mentioned with Sherman, Van Alstyne's seeding is all about finishing these final 3 weeks and what they can do in it, because after playing Salina, if you want to throw that out and say, okay, everybody's going to lose to Salina, they're going to play Aubrey and Sanger coming up, and they've already played Crum. So depending on how things shake out this week, there is a chance that Van Alstyne can clinch a playoff spot, even if they lose, depending on the other outcomes in the district. But if you want to avoid 4th place, which is something they weren't able to do last year, they beat Crum and then they beat nobody else in district play, then you've got to find a way to beat some other people. And if you can beat Salina this week, then you can beat anybody in this district. But obviously, if you lose, you've got to bounce back pretty quick, because you have 2 key games that are going to decide seeding coming up the final 2 weeks. But this is a better Van Alstyne team. We've talked about it all year compared to last year. They only won 3 games last year. They've won 6 so far. They're sitting at 6-1. The one loss is to an ANDA team that I think they're at least in the hunt for a playoffs, and they're in a really tough district. They're in that district with our guy who's state ranked and Melissa who's state ranked, Paris who's really good, and they lost that game by a touchdown. So they could easily be undefeated at this point. So they're obviously better. Defense is playing really well. The offense has balance and has some weapons. It's just a question of can they beat the teams that they weren't able to beat last year Aubrey still obviously is really good. Their only loss on the season is against Salina. And then Sanger is improved, but I think that's a game that, compared to last year, Van Alstyne could win that game and at least get third and avoid Graham in the first round of the playoffs, which is something they weren't able to do last year. So we'll see if we want to compare scores. If you want to, I'll throw it out here now just because we can. Salina beat Aubrey 49-14 to open district play. And if you want to do the comparison, if you don't remember because it's been a couple weeks, Van Alstyne beat Crum 43-14, and then Salina beat Crum 70-7. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when Van Alstyne plays Sanger next week, and then ends at Aubrey. So we'll see how things shake out with this with the big matchup. Like I said, winner gets sole possession of first place with 2 weeks to go when Van Alstyne travels to Salina in 4A Division II action. The next game on the schedule is down in 3A in District 4 3A Division 1. Whitesboro hits the road and they will travel to Bowie. Whitesboro is 3-4 overall and 2-2 in district play after they lost a heartbreaker last week 34-28 in double overtime against Pilot Point, while Bowie is 2-5 overall, 0-4 in district play after they lost against Paradise 31-20, and things are shaping up in this district rather well. Getting a really clear picture of the 5 teams that are going to be battling for the 4 spots. Brock and Pilot Point are undefeated at 4-0, and they will both clinch playoff spots with their wins this week if that happens. Peaster is at 3-1 in third place, and Whitesboro is currently tied with Paradise at 2-2 for fourth place. And the other 3 teams, Boyd, Ponder, and Bowie, are all have losing records in district play. Talking about last week, Pilot Point Whitesboro has been close matchup the last couple of years. Obviously, this year no exception. Very low scoring. 7-3. So it was a 7-3 at halftime. Whitesboro actually had the lead. They led 7-6 going to the fourth quarter, and they actually were up late in the game. They just weren't unable to finish it off. Pilot Point was able to tie it with 35 seconds left to tie the game at 21, send it to overtime. Both teams scored in the first overtime, and then Pilot Point was able to score and then stop Whitesboro's attempt to win that game 34-28. So if Whitesboro would have won that one, they potentially had a chance, depending on what happened this week, to make the playoffs. But again, I feel like I say this with just about everybody. The games that Whitesboro has to win are in front of them. Obviously, the key one will be when they play Paradise. Coming up, Peaster is a team that was not in the mix last year. Boyd was actually one of the teams that was in the mix, and Whitesboro ends with Peaster, but they're going to have Paradise next week. So again, this is sort of hey, you're playing a team that's 0-4 in district play. You got to win it to kind of keep pace with what everybody else has done against Bowie, and then if you want to win tiebreakers. You've got to do it against Paradise next week, and you've got to do it potentially, for playoff seeding with Peaster to end the season. So Whitesboro's got 3 games in front of them that, if they take care of business, they're looking at the 3rd seed, which again in this district is no shame because Brock is obviously highly regarded as they're ranked number 2 in the state, and Pilot Point. We talked about them last week. There's a chance that the way things are looking with them, their only loss in district play is going to be against Brock. And Whitesboro had their chances last week. Matt Harper had 4 touchdown passes, 2 of them to Torin Nagelstad. He finished with 5 catches for 83 yards and those 2 touchdowns. Harper was 11 of 21, passing for 152 yards and the 4 touchdowns. Jake Hermes, 3 catches for 42 yards. He had the touchdown catch in the first overtime to keep the game going. And then Jay Sanders had another touchdown had the other touchdown catch as well. So take care of business this week, and then you've got 2 probably must-wins. The one next week is almost definitely a must-win, just because while you're taking on Bowie, if we're looking at Paradise, look who they have. It's Peaster. So if you win and you're Whitesboro and you're sitting at 3-2, if Paradise wins that game, you're going to have a 3-way tie in third place. Peaster, Paradise, and you Whitesboro all at 3-2, and you're going to play both of those teams. And if that's the case, if you win one of them, then you should make the playoffs. The problem is you may not know which one you may need to win based on how they finish up as well. So, but it's right there. You have a chance to, like I said, to get the 3rd seed, and it's very obvious what you have to do. You have to find a way to win these last couple games, and that starts with their trip to Bowie on Friday night. Moving over to District 5-3A Division 1, we will see the Howe Bulldogs go on the road and take on Mineola. Mineola is 3-4 and 2-2 after they lost 42-14 against Pottsboro, and Howe is coming off a 31-21 loss against Commerce. Howe has had chances. We've talked about it a couple times. This is the 3rd game now, maybe even the 4th game, because they had another game decided by just 2 touchdowns. To get that first win in a long time, to get that first win of this season, to be in the mix. They played Emory Reigns so close, had a lead late, couldn't hold it. This game was actually it's really crazy to look at the box score because much like the Pilot Point Whitesboro game, defensive battle. Howe's leading 7-3 going to the 4th quarter, and the teams combined for 6 touchdowns in the 4th quarter. And Commerce is able to get up by virtue of their running attack. It was a very contrast and styles type of game. Commerce wanted to run, Howe wanted to pass, and Commerce was able to make a couple big plays to pull out this game and for them to stay in the mix. However limited their chances are, and we'll talk about the standings when we talk about Pottsboro next. But Austin Haley led the way. He was 22 of 39 passing for 275 yards with a touchdown pass to Caleb McNutt. And he also ran for a touchdown, while Carson Daniels had the other touchdown. He had 17 carries for 34 yards. Haley also on the ground, 5 carries for 49 yards. Cooper Jones led Howe, 6 catches, 81 yards. Ethan Lopez was not far behind with 6 catches for 72. Ryan Huff had 3 for 53. So balanced through the air there. Just like I said, Howe is they're right there, and I don't know how many more chances they're going to have left. They do still have Bonham. I believe that game is next week, and we'll talk about Bonham here in a second because that's who Pottsboro is going to play. But that's a potential game for them to pull out next week because they're going to finish against Mount Vernon, and we'll talk about them as well. As right now they're state ranked and they're in first place along with Pottsboro. So Mineola is taking a step back from last year when they shared the district title with Pottsboro. I don't. If it was at Howe, I might feel a little bit better. And I'm sure Howe remembers last year. This game was a 70-7 Mineola win. So I know that doesn't sit well with them. But we'll see if they can play. If they can kind of either keep it close, have some positive momentum going into that game against Bonham, which is at home, the last home game. And Bonham's a team that's been kind of all over the place with their results. That may be a chance for, and that was a game last year that was super close. How lost on a field goal at the end, so that might be a chance for them to get in the win column if they can't this week when they go to Mineola. And then the other games, we're just talking about Bonham. Pottsboro is going to be heading to Bonham on Friday night. This is Pottsboro, who is 4-2 overall and 4-0 in district play. They are sharing the lead with Mount Vernon, while Bonham is 3-4 overall and 2-2 in district play. They lost to Mount Vernon last week, 56-0. I don't know if the loss itself was surprising. Obviously, like we said, Mount Vernon's very good. They're undefeated on the season. They're 7-0 and they're in the top 10. So not that much of a surprise. But Bonham had put up a ton of points against a ton of people. They put up 76 points, 71 points against 76 points. It was 76 points. 76 points in a win over Commerce. Then they had 51 points last week when they beat Winsboro, stopping that 2-point conversion late. But they'd also been giving up a bunch of points, so I knew that Mount Vernon was obviously going to score. I didn't think Bonham would get shut out though, so that's interesting to note if you want to pay attention to those sort of things, especially because after Bonham plays these two in a row, Mount Vernon and Pottsboro are going to play next week, and that's essentially going to decide the district championship. So be interesting to see what Bonham's result against Pottsboro is to kind of compare the Pottsboro-Mount Vernon matchups against Bonham. Pottsboro last week, they're rolling right along in district play, and they continued that with the 42-14 win over Mineola. A bit of revenge for last year. We talked about last year, this Mineola-Pottsboro game went into overtime. It was a shootout, 57-49. And so this was definitely not a shootout. Pottsboro was up 28-7 at halftime, kind of cruised from there. They did most of their damage on the ground. Couple hundred-yard rushers. Major McBride, 14 carries, 138 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Jet Carroll, 16 carries, 108 yards, and 2 scores. Halen Flanagan had a touchdown pass to Grayson Watson late, and that was pretty much the story. Pottsboro had almost 300 yards rushing against Mineola, and they really shut down Mineola. Mineola didn't even get to 200 yards of offense. They had a couple big plays to get on the 2 touchdown drives, but outside of that, they really didn't do a whole heck of a lot. So Pottsboro's 4-0, Mount Vernon's 4-0. I think it's very obvious the way things have shaken out in this district. The winner of that game next week is the district champ, and the loser is going to be the 2nd seed for the playoffs. Bonham is in the middle of an interesting battle. Mineola, Winsboro, and Bonham are all 2-2. And then Rains and Commerce are at 1-3, and Howe is at 0-4. So it looks like 2 of the 3 in that middle are going to make the playoffs, and that's probably going to come down to the last week because Bonham beat Winsboro but lost to Mineola, and Mineola beat Bonham and Winsboro. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I would bet Mineola's in a good spot because they have the bottom 3 teams. Their 2 losses are to the top 2, so they're in really good shape. And they already have the tiebreakers over the other 2. So right now, Bonham's in a good spot because they have that win over Winsboro as a tiebreaker. And they're gonna, I think they want to get back on track against Pottsboro. I don't know if that's gonna work because, we talk about Bonham's giving up a ton of points. Since district play started, the 42 points that Pottsboro scored last week was their lowest point total in district play. They've scored at least 42 in every game, and none of their games have been close. Their closest game is 35 points. So they're rolling. They look like they're primed for the big showdown with Mount Vernon next week. But you got to take care of business for sure this week against a bottom team that, like I said, they need every win they can get if they want to get into the playoffs. Pottsboro has won 6 of the last 7 games. Pottsboro will clinch a playoff spot if they do win. Mount Vernon will clinch a playoff spot if they win. And just to go back to that bottom defense, Bonham's given up 31 points in every game. So that's sort of your low water mark if you're Pottsboro. You got to score at least 4 or 5 touchdowns for sure. That's what Bonham's been allowing, and they've given up at least 48 points in 5 of their 7 games. So you can get into the 40s and above against this bottom defense. They've been doing it all year. The question is, which matchup are you going to get with their offense? Because they've had some huge offensive nights for sure. But like I said, Pottsboro's on a roll, have a chance to clinch a playoff spot, play for that district title next week for sure, and we'll see what happens when they travel to Bonham this week in 5-3A Division I action. We slide down to District 8-3A Division II, and we'll start off with a team that does not play this week. That is the White Red Tigers. They won a defensive battle against SNS. This is the second straight year this game was a defensive battle, and they come out on top this time. Last year, SNS won 10-8, and White flipped the script, and they won this game 14-0. Scoreless game, till late in the third quarter. Colby Jones, who had 19 carries for 150 yards, scores a touchdown. And then early in the fourth quarter, Maverick Sartain catches a 76-yard touchdown from Caden Caraway, who was 11 of 22 passing for 229 yards. Most of that was to Sartain. He had 3 catches for 119 yards, although Zy Daniels also chipped in 6 catches for 94 yards. And White was able to earn their third straight district victory. Way back when they opened district, they lost to Gunner, which obviously there's no shame losing to Gunner, who is second in the state, still undefeated, the only undefeated team in the district. But since then, they've won 3 in a row. They are currently tied for second place with Bells, and SNS is only a game behind. So they're just hanging out. They're going to see what happens. There's a slight chance, again, it comes down to different matchups and what happens. There's a slight chance that White could clinch a playoff spot this week. Most likely, they'll have to wait until next week and see the results of those games, which is, it's not ideal. You like to go into those last two knowing you have your spot locked up. So while they're and of course it's big because they have Bells next week, and we'll talk about them here in a second. So they have the week off before playing Bells, and then they finish with rival Leonard, which could end up being a huge game. It was going to be a huge game last year. One team was going to get in, one team was going to get left out, and then COVID-19 canceled it and sent Leonard to the playoffs instead of giving White a chance to earn it on the field. But they're in really good shape. Like I said, just hanging out, waiting to see what happens in the rest of the district. The non-local game this week is Leonard at Lone Oak. I don't want to say it's a must-win for Leonard, but they probably have to win. If they lose that one, they're going to be at 1-3, and then they would have to win out and probably need help on a tiebreaker. But I would assume that Leonard's going to win that game and go to 2-2, and that's potentially going to set up a scenario for what happens with what if Leonard if White can clinch this while they're on the bye or not. There's a decent chance, but like I said, we'll wait and see what some of the results are. But like I said, White Right's sitting pretty, pending the outcomes. They're in really good shape to make the playoffs after missing last year. And part of that's going to be the results of the other games in that district, and the all-local matchup that is of great interest to everybody in this district. Bells will be traveling to SNS. Bells is 5-3 and 3-1 in district play. They won last week 57-14 against Lone Oak, and we mentioned White Right's win last week over SNS 14-0. That drops SNS to 2-5 and 2-1 in district play. We said last week that was going to be a huge game because somebody, if you're SNS, you were going to stay undefeated, be 3-0, tied for first place. If you're White Right, you were avenging a loss last year that was so close that if there's 3 extra points, if White Right kicks a field goal in that game last year, that could have totally changed a team making the playoffs and a team being left out, just based on that. So that's how close it was. And so this is huge because Bells, like we said, they're also 3-1, so they're sitting there tied with White Right in second place, and SNS is right behind. If SNS is able to win this game, now you're talking Bells drops down to 4th place, and SNS would be tied with White Right for second place behind Gunner. So this is a huge seeding battle. This is a game last year that Bells won 49-3. And they will Bells will clinch a playoff spot if they do win this game. So there's that. So that's on the line for them to lock that up. And like I said, they want to keep pace with White Right because they'll play them next week, and then they could officially lock in the number 2 seed because their loss is to Gunner as well. So there's no way. And Bells has the bye, finishes with the bye, which is why they're going to end up being ahead of everybody. So if they win out, which is SNS this week, White next week, finish 5-1, get the second seed, they'd be in the same spot that they were in last year, unless something crazy happened with Gunner. Gunner would have to lose twice for Bells to be able to have a chance at the top spot. So and SNS, like I said, they're coming off a game that they struggled. They had picked up that momentum we talked about with them. They went into district play. They didn't have any wins. They weren't feeling really good about themselves. They won 2 games in a row. They had a chance to make it 3, but they just could not get anything going offensively. They had 92 yards passing, 90 yards rushing, had 4 turnovers. It was just not a good game. Colton Corville had a good game. He had 5 catches for 92 yards. Coda Richardson did run 12 times for 80 yards, but outside of that, there was not a whole lot. And like I said, in the passing game, and there were 3 interceptions that White was able to take just enough advantage of. They won the turnover battle. They only had 1 turnover. SNS had 4. You can probably say that was the difference. And made some big plays, and that was enough to get the win over SNS. So we'll see. Like I said, this is going to be a huge swing game. We'll see what happens there. And then, of course, the other game in this district, Gunner, is off its bye last week. They are 7-0 and 3-0 in district play, and they are taking on Blue Ridge. Blue Ridge is sitting at 1-7 and 0-4. This was a game that did not get played last year because of COVID, so this is the first opportunity for the Gunner Tigers to take on their former assistant and offensive coordinator Tim Wiley, who took over at Blue Ridge last year. Like I said, the game didn't get played because of COVID-19 reasons. Gunner will clinch a playoff spot with a win, so there's that. Not that they're essentially worried about that, but they can also potentially lock in the top seed for the playoffs depending on the other outcomes. They still have to play SNS, so if SNS were to win, they would not be able to potentially do that. Oh no, they wouldn't be able to do that. I'm sorry, because technically, yeah, that's true. But Gunner has won 37 district games in a row, so like I said, they're probably not real worried about it. Blue Ridge has not won since their opener. They lost last week against Leonard 39-0. And so they've been eliminated. There's no way for them to get into the mix at 0-4 because they only have 2 games left. And one of them against, they have Gunner this week, but they basically lose tiebreakers on everybody else, even if they get to 2-4, because the only other team they haven't played yet is Lone Oak, and Lone Oak is about to be on the verge of being eliminated as well. So again, a lot of these districts are shaping up. We have at this point in the season, we have 4 teams fighting for 5 spots. It will probably come down to the last week. But depending on the outcomes, there's a good chance after Friday night. Gunner has clinched its spot. Bells has clinched its spot. And then the question is who's going to get 2 of the, which is just like last year, who's going to get 2 of the 3 spots between SNS, White, and Leonard. And since White and Leonard finish against each other, that's obviously going to be a huge game, most likely for seeding, or potentially like it was last year, get in, winners in, losers out, and that's it. So a really good race shaping up in 8-3A like it was last year, and we'll see what happens with those matchups, including that trip by Gunner to Blue Ridge as they come off their bye. I'm sure they used it to get healthy. They banged up at some spots, guys in and out of the lineup, and I'm sure they're anxious to get back, play these last couple games, and get ready for the playoffs, make another deep playoff run, which I think everybody assumes is on the doorstep of happening. So, speaking of doorsteps, go down to District 5-2A Division 1. This is a crazy district after 1 week. A lot of unexpected things have happened in this district. So far, a lot of results from last year have not stayed true to form that we saw last year. And to reset the standings, Albert is 2-0. Tom Bean is 0-2, and then you have Collinsville, Tioga, Trenton, and Lindsay are all 1-1. So a lot of maneuvering is going to happen over the last couple weeks in this district. And the big game in this district is the all-local one that's going to have Collinsville traveling to Tioga on Friday night. Collinsville is 3-4, 1-1. Tioga is 3-4, 1-1, and they both lost last week. Tioga lost against Lindsay, 43-25, and Collinsville lost against Alvord, 36-25. Collinsville opened with a win against Lindsay, although that was a crazy comeback. They were down 20 at halftime, and then they ended up winning 56-27. So I don't know if that means anything that Collinsville did that to Lindsay, and then Tioga turned around last week and lost to Lindsay by 3 touchdowns. This was a game that was not close last year. Collinsville won at 61-0. Again, I keep saying this with Tioga every week. It's not the same group, so you can't really compare. But there is that. You have Collinsville kids that are very confident going into this matchup. Nobody in this district will be able to clinch a playoff spot this week. However, Alvord is playing Trenton. That's the non-local matchup. They would be 3-0 and they'd be pretty stinking close to locking up a spot. Like I said, they can't officially do it this week, but they'd be in really good shape going into the second to last week. And the winner of the Collinsville-Tioga game will have a chance to clinch a playoff spot next week with a win. So if you win this week, you can officially earn your spot next week with a win. You might still do it with a loss, but basically the winner of this game can win the next week and go into the last week knowing, hey, we're in no matter what happens. And I think that'd be a huge deal for both of them. Obviously for Tioga, who missed out on the playoffs last year, and then Collinsville, who's looking to improve on that third place finish from last year as well, and they'd be in a pretty good spot to do that if they were able to get a win. We did mention they played last week, so 43-25 was the score. Tioga lost against Lindsay. Chase Evans led Tioga. He had 9 carries for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. And again, a lot of these games, I don't know what it was. It was a full moon or some kind of moon on Friday. I mean, this was another game that's a defensive battle. It's 7-7 at halftime, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts scoring second. There's a lot of, I don't know if it was people just getting slow starts or I don't know what it was, but a lot of action in the second half compared to almost no action in the first half. You had 2 touchdowns scored in the first half, and then 8 touchdowns scored in the second half. So I don't know what's going on, but there were a lot of games like that around the area in week 8 for whatever reason. So I mentioned that. So Evans had the big day on the ground. Logan Westbrook had touchdown passes to Carson Luter and Sam Mott, but Lindsay was able to keep the ball on the ground. They ran for almost 400 yards and broke things open there in the second half. And then Collinsville losing their game against Alvord 36-25. They were behind from the start, trying to play catch up. Just never could really do that. They did a lot of their damage through the air. Logan Jenkins, 25 of 33 for 314 yards. Had an interception, but did throw 4 touchdown passes. Was it 4 touchdown passes? 3. He had 3 touchdown passes, and he also ran for a score. No, that is 4. No, that's 3. I can't read. Okay, yes, so that is 3. He did have. So he had a hand in 4 touchdowns. He had a hand in all 4 of the touchdowns. 3 passing and then 1 rushing. Nathan Bocanegra had 10 catches for 117 yards. Rylan Newman had 6 for 111, had a touchdown catch. Colin Barnes 3 for 42, had a touchdown catch. And Parker Wells added the 3rd touchdown as well. So it was a relatively close game. They just were never able to really kind of to get into it. They were down 21-6 at halftime. It was 21-12 going to the third quarter, and again, relatively not a lot happening, and then 4 touchdowns there in the fourth quarter, and Alvord was able to hang on there. So gonna be a key matchup for sure with Collinsville at Tioga on Friday. I think you probably have to give the edge to Collinsville right now. but I think this has a chance to be a shootout. I think both teams have weapons. I think this could be a style sort of game. Collinsville's found something with the passing game. Tioga wants to run it. And obviously whoever's going to be whoever's more successful at what they want to do, and not be forced to do something else, I think is going to probably be tied with Lindsay for second place. I think Alvord and Trenton, obviously Trenton has something to say about that, but if Alvord gets to 3-0, you're going to have a couple teams that are sitting at 2-1, and I think and obviously the winner of this game is guaranteed to be that. And then Lindsay is going to be taking on Tom Bean. That game is going to be played at Bells. Again, we're still unfortunately waiting for Tom Bean's renovations, construction, however you want to deem it. That has continued to have been delayed. Now we're a month past when they were hoping to have it ready, and it's still not ready. So unfortunately, I don't know if Tom Bean's going to be able to have a home game on its campus because they're running out of time to do that, and this was another chance to get that done, and unfortunately they were unable to. They do have the last game of the season, November 5th, is supposed to be at home against Collinsville. Maybe it's ready by then, but I mean we're 2 weeks away from that, and they're still stuck being nomads. They've played at Trenton, they've played at Bells now for this is the second time, so they are 0-6 and 0-2 after they lost 55-6 against Trenton, and of course Lindsay we mentioned had the win over Tioga, so they're 3-4 and 1-1. This is going to be one of those matchups where Tommy didn't get shut out last week, so that's good, but still ends up losing, lopsided. Hasn't won. If they lose, I don't think they're mathematically eliminated, but it's going to be really hard for them because they're going to have to win the last two, and even that at 2-3 might not be enough to get them into the playoffs, just based on how things are shaping up in this district. Tommy is trying to avoid an 0-7 start for the first time since 2011. They have not won in the last 8 meetings against Lindsay. I don't know how upset Lindsay was at losing that game against Collinsville last week, because I think I thought the Tioga-Lindsay game would be closer. But I think if you're Lindsay, you may have used up your mulligan, and you still have to play Alvord, so you cannot afford to lose a game like this where you should probably come away with a victory to kind of keep pace with what's going on at the top of the standings. So will be interesting to see. Hopefully, like I said, Tommy can get some positive momentum going. Hit the last couple weeks. I know it's been a rough season in a lot of ways for them. They got the one touchdown last week was a Branson Ashlock touchdown run in the fourth quarter to avoid being shut out for the third straight game. And we'll see. You never know. Stranger things have happened. But we'll see what Tom Bean and Lindsay have. And again, that game is at Bells, so do not go to Tom Bean. If you do, you will find a stadium that is dark and still being worked on from a construction standpoint. So those are all the 11-man games. We'll close it out like we always do as we hit Texoma Christian. They will be traveling to Fort Worth Covenant Classical in their TAPS Division III District 2 6-man matchup. TCS is 0-7 and 0-2 after losing to Azo Christian last week 46-0, and Fort Worth Covenant Classical is 5-2 and 2-0. They had the district bye, but they played a non-district game against Baird 70, and they won 78-30. This is must-win territory for TCS. They are up against it in terms of trying to make the playoffs. Both Azo Christian and Prestonwood North are done in district play. Azo Christian has already clinched a playoff spot. They finished at 3-2 in district, and Prestonwood North is at 2-3. In order for TCS to get to the playoffs, they need to win out because they're going to lose the tiebreaker against North if they finish 2-3. So they need to beat Classical. They need to beat Faustina, who is also tied for first place at 2-0, and they need to beat Dallas Fairhill. So, much like everybody else, you look at the final 3 games of your season. If you're Texoma Christian, these are must-wins. They've had struggles offensively. They've been shut out in 3 of the last 4 games. Covenant Classical clinches a playoff spot with a victory, and they want to keep pace with Faustina because that would obviously be a big showdown for first place. They are the only 2 teams that are undefeated still in district. They still have to play each other. So TCS is in a rough spot. They've got to really pick it up. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that because they're playing the top 2 teams in the district. But that's the way it lays out for them if they want to have a chance. Otherwise, they're probably looking at can they at least beat Dallas Fairhill to get a win and avoid last place in the district standings. That's a game that would be next week. And that would be that's their last home game as well. So you might get a little bit of positivity there. I assume that's some sort of end of the year last home game festivity type thing. And if you can win, like I said, it may just be for pride after this week because they need to win. Otherwise, they would end up losing a tiebreaker against Prestonwood North. So that's how everything shakes out. I know it's a lot to worry about. We're at that point where there's just enough scenarios to keep a lot of people alive. I think when we see the results from week 9 coming up, we'll have a much better grasp of where people stand. Like I said, there's a really good chance that 3 or 4 people clinch their playoff spots on Friday night to kind of clear that up, and then we'll know for sure looking at the last 2 weeks who's still alive, who's already been eliminated, who needs to do what the last 2 games of the season, at least going into week 10. Can they afford to lose? Is it a must-win? That sort of thing. And as always, you can see all that sort of stuff. You can see the standings and the results on HeraldDemocrat.com late Friday night, early Saturday, depending on what time you get up, to kind of see what the standings look like, who's where, and what the matchups are for the next week of games, to kind of see who you need to root for, what you need to have happen to help your team or hurt somebody else that you may need to lose. So it's all starting to take shape, and I think it's going to be exciting down the wire. There's a lot of really good matchups the last 3 weeks that are going to impact people getting in and people who get stuck staying home. So again, that's a look back at week 8. That's a look at week 9. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy listening to these every week. I thank you for listening. It looks like we were going to have football weather, and now we're back to somewhat summer weather on Friday. So maybe Mother Nature can figure out what she wants fans to have on a Friday night. So enjoy the games. Stay safe as always. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you next week.